This video is brought to you by True Tales of Buried Treasure, the largest collection of old treasure magazines in the West. On our website, you can search for individual treasure stories by region, or buy our original magazines themselves. To pay us a visit, please click on the link in the description. Enjoy. The town of Murrieta and nearby Murrieta hot springs were named after Don Juan Murrieta, who was born in Santurce, Spain. At age 18, in 1863, he immigrated to the United States and began life on a ranch. Preoccupied with his business endeavors, Murrieta didn't become a naturalized citizen until 1876. He initially herded sheep in California's San Joaquin Valley, but by the mid-1870s, he had moved south into what was then San Diego County. In the spring of 1875, Murrieta, along with partners Zanjuro and Pujol, purchased the vast Temecula and Paba ranchos, together spanning 52,000 acres, for just $1 per acre. The trio were the first sheepmen to enter Temecula Valley, a region that now lies in the heart of Riverside County. After his portion of the rancho was subdivided in 1886, Murrieta took a position as chief deputy of the Civil Division in the Los Angeles Sheriff's Office. This was a volatile time in the city's history, teetering on the edge of lawlessness. Murrieta served faithfully in this role for 39 years, retiring on July 1, 1927, at the age of 81. In 1894, he was 49 years old, known not only for his professionalism, but also for his crisp clothing and signature ivory-handled revolver slung low in a polished holster. Frank Dowler, then sheriff of Palmdale, wrote in his diary, "All you had to do to get along with Murrieta was mind your own business and avoid making a nuisance of yourself." In January 1894, the year of the first major railroad strike, Dowler contacted Murrieta for help in locating a fugitive named Albert Failing, a former chemist from New York. Failing had escaped from the Palmdale jail while being held on charges connected to a past robbery of a westbound St. Louis and San Francisco railroad train. Dowler's notes describe Failing as 5 feet 11.5 inches tall, weighing 153 pounds, with hazel eyes and a thin mustache. A frail-looking man, Dowler remarked that Failing appeared as if he had narrowly avoided death more than once. Escaping with Failing were 2 Mexican bandits, Juan Romero and Hector Gonzalez, both wanted for multiple murders. Dowler believed the trio was traveling together, noting in his diary, "The 2 Mex are to be considered dangerous." Oddly, no reward was listed for the 2 Mexicans, but a $100 bounty was offered for Failing, as well as for his train-robbing accomplices, W. Haight and Tom Weaver. All 5 outlaws were believed to be somewhere near the Temecula Rancho, later renamed Murrieta Hot Springs. The story of their crimes tied back to the infamous Great Express robbery of 1886. On October 25th of that year, a man carrying a valise boarded the express car of a departing train at St. Louis Union Depot. He handed a note to Adams Express messenger, David S. Frothingham. The letter, supposedly signed by R.A.J.B. Barrett and backed by a pass from W.H. Damsel, the express company's superintendent, authorized passage to Pierce City. At the time, deadhead riding was a common practice among Adams Express employees, so Frothingham accepted the documents without question. Moments later, he realized his mistake. The man struck him, stole his .38 revolver, bound and gagged him, and claimed to be the outlaw Jim Cummings, a reputed member of the Jesse James gang. Using Frothingham's key, the robber opened the express safe and took $57,000 in cash and $20,000 in negotiable securities. As a final insult, he stuffed a few silver coins into the unconscious messenger's pockets and leapt from the train at Marshall's Crossing. When the train reached St. Clair and Frothingham was finally freed, coins spilled from his pockets, leaving no doubt that a bold and highly orchestrated robbery had taken place. After the daring train robbery, Adams Express messenger David S. Frothingham gave his account of the holdup, but the silver coins found in his pockets cast doubt on his innocence. He described the outlaw as 6 feet tall, hazel-eyed and thin as a whisper, a peculiar description that didn't match the real Jim Cummings, the infamous bandit he claimed had robbed the train. Authorities grew suspicious, Frothingham, insisting he was a victim, was nonetheless arrested and charged as a conspirator in the robbery. Then came an unexpected twist. A few days after the crime, the St. Louis Globe-Democrat received a letter signed by Jim Cummings. Inside was a detailed confession and 2 wrappers from the stolen money. The writer claimed he had checked a pistol in a billy club at the St. Louis Union Depot baggage room. Pinkerton detectives retrieved both items, along with scraps of 2 popular ballads, The Rock Island Railroad and A Man You Don't Meet Every Day. One of the song sheets had an address that had been erased, but not quite well enough. Through sharp detective work and discreet surveillance, suspicion soon landed on a Chicago coal dealer named Fred Whitrock. Investigators connected him to W. Haight, a former Adams Express employee who had been fired for theft. Pinkerton agents placed Haight under 24-hour surveillance in St. Louis. On Christmas Eve, 1886, agents arrested Whitrock in a Chicago saloon at Lincoln and Madison Streets. He confessed and implicated Albert Failing, claiming Failing had taken off with $2,500 in silver coins. Soon after, Haight and another accomplice, Tom Weaver, were also arrested. All 3 stood trial and were convicted. Whitrock confessed in full, and all the stolen money was accounted for, except the $2,500 that Failing allegedly disappeared with. Whitrock and Haight received 7-year sentences in Missouri State Prison, while Weaver got 5. Frothingham, after spending 7 months in jail, was eventually acquitted on May 4, 1887. As for Albert Failing, he vanished. Years passed. In 1893, Murrieta Hot Springs, formerly part of San Diego County, was incorporated into the newly formed Riverside County. With the railroad connection to San Diego now broken, the town settled into relative obscurity. That is, until Failing resurfaced. One night in a Palmdale saloon, an inebriated Failing couldn't help himself. He began bragging about his role in the legendary Great Express robbery of 1886. "That was the clincher," wrote Sheriff Frank Dowler in his diary. "I strapped on my .45 Colt and set out to trim the population by 1. Failing, too drunk to resist, was taken into custody and jailed in Palmdale, awaiting the arrival of Pinkerton agents from San Francisco. He was locked up alongside 2 other prisoners, Mexican outlaws Juan Romero and Hector Gonzalez. The next morning, Dowler questioned Failing. At first, he denied everything, but as the interrogation wore on, his resolve crumbled. He confessed that he'd spent about $1,000 of the loot, but had hidden the remaining $1,500 in various places over the years. It was too heavy to carry around. His most recent hiding place? A hill near the California Southern Railroad station at Murrieta Hot Springs. Dowler and Failing agreed they would ride out the next morning to recover the silver. But morning came, and the jailhouse was empty. The 3 prisoners had escaped. They had pried loose some rotted floorboards and vanished into the night, stealing 3 horses from a nearby corral. But Dowler wasn't easily fooled. He figured Failing would go straight for his buried treasure, assuming the outlaw had told the truth. Dowler boarded the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe train and rode to Murrieta Station. He spent the next 2 days quietly watching the town, waiting. Then, at last, he spotted Juan Romero and Hector Gonzalez. The press and horticulturist reported, when the 2 Mexican bandits learned that Dowler was hunting them, they cut for the high country. Juan Romero and Hector Gonzalez fled into the rugged wilderness, weaving across Murrieta Creek and heading into the northern slopes of the Santa Rosa Mountains, just 6 miles south of Lake Elsinore. Sheriff Frank Dowler, undeterred, borrowed a horse from a local livery stable and rode after them. He trailed the outlaws along the foothills to the head of Temecula Canyon, where he finally caught up with them. From a high ridge overlooking their camp, Dowler drew his revolver and shouted a final warning: surrender or die. The desperados went for their guns. Moments later, the canyon echoed with gunfire. When the smoke cleared, both bandits lay lifeless in the dust. Before burying them in the anonymous soil of Temecula Canyon, Dowler took photographs of their bodies, images later found in his personal diary, to claim the reward bounty. That night he stayed with a friend working the Good Hope mine, but his pursuit wasn't over. The next day, Dowler picked up the trail of Albert Failing again, following it into Terracotta City, only to lose him once more. To avoid detection, Failing assumed a new identity. He found work under the name David Brown at the California Coal and Clay Company. Then, in October 1891, he abruptly left his job and disappeared again. Years passed without a trace. It wasn't until late 1897, while drilling wells for a new pipeline in Terracotta, that Failing's path crossed fate once more. A laborer mentioned to Dowler that a man calling himself Henry Platt bore an uncanny resemblance to the wanted posters still tacked to the wall of the local post office. That very afternoon, Dowler waited outside the company's office. When Platt stepped outside, Dowler drew his revolver and ordered him to freeze. But Failing reached for his weapon, and Dowler fired twice in rapid succession. According to the Elsinore Press, the shots rang out so close together they sounded like a single crack of thunder. Failing fell dead on the spot. The buried silver, however, was never found. In the pages of Dowler's diary lies the only known clue. The loot is still buried near the Murrieta train station, as far as I know. In those days, in a region where formal law held little weight, Frank Dowler's word was law and gospel. Long before Riverside County was carved out of San Diego County, his judgment reigned supreme. Some say it still should. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to read the original article or purchase the magazine from which it was taken, please check out our website, truetalesofburiedtreasure.com.